Welcome back to the CTO Playbook, the podcast dedicated to helping CTOs excel. I'm your host, Adam Horner. With 30 years in the industry, including over a decade as a CTO, I have coached and mentored more than 100 engineers and tech leaders. This podcast covers crucial topics for CTOs, providing insights, strategies, and practical advice to help you excel in your role. In this episode, I'll be talking to Warren Beazley, known as the CTO Recruiter. Warren has been hiring senior technical talent for as long as I've been working, and we'll be talking about the recruitment market for CTOs in 2024, how it is unique compared to history, and what you can do to increase your chances of finding your perfect CTO role. Keep listening for Warren's 5-part strategy for landing your dream CTO job. Warren, welcome. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming along today. It's great to have you here.
Adam, it's absolutely my privilege. So thank you for inviting me along. I'm looking forward to hopefully sharing some useful insight with you and your audience today.
Brilliant. Well, let's kick it off then and give the audience a bit of an idea about where you're coming from and how you got into recruiting CTOs in the first place.
Well, okay. So how long have we got? I'll try and zap this down to 60 seconds if I can. My recruitment career began back in the mid-90s. Prior to that, I used to work in Lloyd's of London, insurance industry, pretty much by chance, as most people I know who have any longevity in my industry fell into it by chance. And it really was like, I guess kind of like a duck to water. I think it's fair to say I'm quite a people person. And the first probably 6 or 7 years in recruitment was in the contract industry. And all I was doing was placing Sybase, C and C++ analyst programmers to investment banks in the city and the fast developing Docklands arena. And it really was akin to a boiler room environment. I also compare it to, if you've ever seen these documentaries on Gordon Ramsay and Marco Pierre White, what goes on behind. I've seen grown men in tears if they've left a comma off of a CV that they were sending out. Absolute quality. The clients only ever saw the best of the best, but it was a steep learning curve, but you learned very, very quickly. I then got involved working with my brother, who's followed me from the insurance industry into recruitment, into tech recruitment as well. And we set up our own business back in the early 2000s. And it became quite evident, probably after about 5 or 6 years, that the market was beginning to change. Rather than being a transactional supplier of CVs to any given job requirement, this was more of providing a solution to our clients. And that solution being that they have a key hire that has a key responsibility and, more importantly, a key outcome needed from their role, and to go to market.
So recruitment with purpose then, really.
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong, not all clients saw it that way. But that's how we began to position ourselves. So gradually, because of the nature of that approach, the business became more, I guess, naturally progressed into more of a providing tech leaders. And I'll state now, although it's all over my branding and my marketing, the CTO Recruiter, I'm really not hung up about job titles. For me, it's all about outcome. But it's a lot easier to market myself as the CTO Recruiter rather than it's all about outcome recruiter. Hat doesn't have quite so much. It certainly is. So we've been on an interesting journey. We've seen, several market, government collapses, financial collapses. But what we're going through now, and if I'm jumping ahead a little too quickly, Adam, then please forgive me. But what we're going through now is quite unique, and it has been happening since before COVID, but COVID has just accelerated it. So there's been some positives, and those are
so perhaps then it's probably worth just sort of consolidating. What did you see the market before these changes? What was typical? What were these outcomes that most companies were looking for? What was the candidate pool like that before the inflection point?
Well, the big change has been the acceleration to remote and hybrid working and the acceptance of that. And prior to that, there were, and again, this is a sweeping generalization. It certainly doesn't apply to everybody and didn't apply so much to what I would call the new age businesses, the startups, the scale-ups. But there was certainly a method prior to COVID that you had to have some really good excuse to want to work at home. And it was almost a guilt trip for somebody, particularly a leader, to be working at home even just one day a week or a fortnight. And that's changed, which I think is a good thing. There is balance. There is definitely balance involved. So that's definitely had an impact on it. But the cause of all this stuff, I really can't put my finger on it. If we were having this conversation in 2008 or in 2000, 2001 or in 95, 96, there were reasons behind it. There was something happening, whether it be the subprime stuff, whether it be, the pound's refusal to go into the euro, whatever it might be, we could more or less identify it. Now, there are so many different things that are having an impact on the industry sector that it's the word I use very often, and it's also echoed back to me from the tech leader I speak to, is it's a very weird time that we're going through. And there's lots of examples that can support that. I think it has led me to believe that the traditional method of hiring, both from a client's perspective, but also from a candidate's perspective, is broken. That traditional approach of here's my CV, or let's find a CV, let's match it to a job.
And when you say broken there, do you mean it's broken with history, or it's broken to the point where it's broken down and needs significant fixing?
It's the latter. I don't think it can be repaired effectively.
Right.
But I guess I do have to give a slight caveat to all of this, is that for roles that it's not important to try and get the best person for the job, then advertising, putting a job advert out there will probably carry on working, more or less. But those roles that an organization requires somebody who is as close to the best that they can get as possible, in my opinion, advertising a job or relying on a job advert is now not the go-to. Unfortunately, if you're between roles, if you're a tech leader, if you're anybody that's between jobs, sadly, the only route to market most people go to is the traditional, what I call the reactive route, which is let's pay some money, let's get my CV down to 1 or 2 pages, and let's just sit and wait in my inbox for jobs to come in and respond to them. That just doesn't work, sadly.
No, and I think a lot of people are still relying on that, aren't they, as their sort of primary route to find the next thing they're looking for.
And don't get me wrong, Adam, if you're between roles, it's never the right time to look for a job when you're looking for a job. And there's loads of examples I could give to support that, but it is, for some, that is the case. But when you're between jobs, you have to still put your CV out there. You have to still respond to adverts. Whereas if you're working, it's a lot easier you can become more selective. You don't have to take the first job that comes along, and you can what I describe as reverse engineering the process, and you consider yourself very much a marketing and branding exercise rather than a chasing job advert exercise.
So if you're still in a role, then it gives you the privilege to be able to position yourself rather than to go and chase after every possible lead there is out there. And that's a big difference in your mind then.
Absolutely. I think, and this sentiment has changed slightly because what I'm about to say, because there are some brilliant people who are in the job market at the moment through no fault of their own. Okay. And they're struggling. But if we go back to normal times, someone like me would focus their search on individuals who are doing the job that my client needs. So a client will come to me, will retain me to find them a CTO. I will focus my attention on finding individuals that are doing the job right now for the competition.
So people are still in a role, basically.
And I would suggest that if you are still in a role now, even if you're not actively looking, there are things that you should be doing to become more proactive, because you don't know when you're going to get that call in to have the chat with the CEO or the founder. And it is very much a case of prevention rather than cure. So
branding yourself after you've had that chat is too late then?
If you've got a 3-month notice period, probably not.
Right, okay.
But you want to avoid having to put the green LinkedIn halo on your photo, if you can help it.
Right.
Okay. Sometimes you have
That's a really bad time then, is it?
It is if you don't want your current employers to know that you're looking for work. Obviously, it's a giveaway. And the best time to do that, to be involved in searching, to be involved in finding that next role for yourself, is when you're doing it already for someone else. I think it's kind of human nature. It's when you're not looking for something, and we could talk the same about relationships. This is probably a really bad example, so forgive me if I offend anybody, but
I'm sure there's a good story in it.
When I was in my late teens, early 20s, and a single guy, and I was trying to attract the sex that was attractive to me, I would very often be completely unsuccessful. When I became a dad and I would push my children around the park in a pram, for the first time ever, I noticed people of the opposite sex taking notice of me, finding me attractive, but I wasn't available. And that's a very bad example to tell you that. But that applies to how you are perceived in the job market.
And that makes the job market one of the most unusual marketplaces, because we tend to think about marketplaces as being supply and demand. But what you're effectively saying is the greatest demand is for those people who are technically out of supply.
Well, there's always supply and demand. There's always that great equalizer. They're always going on. The trick is not to be part of it. The trick is to set yourself aside from that. Allow that to happen, and don't be part of that game, if you like. Set yourself aside, become proactive, be responsible, take ownership for your career path. That would be my message.
That's a great tip. So take action and be proactive about your own career path rather than waiting until you have to. Take care of your career path.
Absolutely. A lot of the techniques that I share with tech leaders, CTOs, when I speak to them, is something that works far better when they're working, because it doesn't actually give their current employer any indication that they're looking for a job or they're unhappy. In fact, it does the opposite. It gives their current employer added kudos that they've got you working for them.
Excellent. Can you give us a couple of examples of the kinds of tips you'd give people in work right now to improve their position?
I can. Yeah, absolutely. I can just run through them. I'll give you a very high level explanation of it. But it's what I describe as the 5 steps, the 5 phases that individual CTOs, tech leaders should consider if they want to take ownership of their career journey, if they're coming to a crossroads, whenever it may be. And the first 2 things, rather like a business plan, the first 2 parts of these processes are the fixed costs, are things that don't often need any attention or altering. And they're simply answers to 2 questions. And when I ask somebody these 2 questions, I have to specifically say, do not answer them now. This is for you to consider and to go away. But it's simply, what value will you bring to your next employer, and demonstrate where you've done that. And I have to jump in, and then I would say, look, I don't want to hear that now, not that I don't care, but, and I then give a very extreme example to prove a point, which would be the typical answer I would get is, I've been at my last place for 10 years or my current role for 10 years. I've never had a day off sick. The founders really like me. I've got certificates on the wall, and I never use all my holiday entitlement. These are kind of given. If you're a tech leader, you would expect to conduct yourself in this way. These are
sort of table stakes, if you like, rather than being the main thing.
Absolutely. These are entry-level things to be a tech leader. The things I'm looking for here is that the outcome of what it is that you and your team do, what you deliver on, your value proposition, whatever that is, to measure it, ideally, in a currency. That's the prime.
So there's some sort of metric by which you can say, here's how you can see how I do this.
Absolutely. So an example I often give, the middle of last year, was I was speaking to a CTO who was, again, having a challenge to find the right role. He wasn't seeing the jobs advertised, and we sort of got him to consider changing his psyche around it. And he came up with this value proposition, which was simply, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm a technical product CTO. I build and grow product teams who, from a standing start, can create a SaaS platform that will generate circa 10 million in ARR 12 months after going live. Something like that. Okay. And that effectively, that's the first 2 stages in the process, but they probably need the most work. And I will share with an individual some prompts, some questions that they can take away and help them get to that. But that essentially becomes their elevator pitch, their brand, what it is they're going to go to market with, or what it is they're going to be known for.
It's sort of answering the who am I question, if I think about it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what it is I do. So if you are, we're in the UK, so if we are in a lift and someone comes into that lift and asks you what it is that you do, and you answer them, you want them to join you and miss a few floors rather than get out the floor before because they're so bored looking at their watch. And that's, yes, it's a little bit cheesy and crass, but that is essentially what I ask people to achieve. So that's the first two stages. And then the third stage is really focusing on what an ideal client or an ideal client avatar would look like to you. The outcome that you deliver, what kind of organizations are going to get the most value from that? And you decide what they're going to look like. Will you decide the criteria? And you literally I would encourage somebody to get a blank sheet of paper and to write down the company and then the individual within the company, what they actually physically look like, their education. Yes, absolutely. It's just so it's a visual thing. It's to get them to think about this individual. And I'm being rather extreme now, but as I've already mentioned, I like to use extremes to prove points. But this individual within this business hasn't been able to get a good night's sleep in the last 6 months because of something, whether it be he's in a chaotic environment and you can bring order to that environment, or whether there's a very obvious roadblock in some strategy that what it is that you do is going to unblock that. But it's having that desire and that will to know that there's somebody out there at these organizations that are really struggling, and what it is that you do is going to resolve that. And once you can accept that today, and I often quote the date to somebody, at the moment, the 20th of June, 2024, you, Mr. or Mrs. CTO, have to consider that you are the best kept secret in your niche industry sector. You may not be, but accept that you are. All right. And you're going on a journey, and the destination of that journey is however far down the line it is. You're going to become an authority. You're going to become a thought leader. You're going to become a minor celebrity in your niche sector. And it's a journey that you go on today. Draw a line in the sand. And this is where I get onto the third point, which is your network. And without wishing to sound too much like Winston Churchill, but never before in the history of mankind has it been easier to grow your network with the right people. And that's the key element. When I got involved in B2B business back in the 80s, to network meant either learning how to play golf, being able to go out to lunch with a client and be able to either hold your liquor or refuse to drink, or essentially you can do everything. I can do all my networking from my desk now.
Yeah. With the advent of networks like LinkedIn and Twitter and other such similar networks, yeah.
Absolutely. There are others out there, but I'm a LinkedIn advocate. And whatever your thoughts are on Microsoft, they've done a pretty good job with LinkedIn as a product. It's got everything that you need in there. And I believe as a tech leader or somebody aspiring to be a tech leader, that's where you should be spending most of your time as well.
And of course, once a network like that gets sort of a critical mass, it's sort of self-perpetuating in that way.
It is. And this is probably the only, not criticism, but the only drawback with LinkedIn is that the next stage in the process, the fourth stage, which is about creating content. You don't decide who sees your content. LinkedIn does. Your content's going to be shared with your network. And ideally, from today moving forward, that network is going to be full of the right people. And just a word of warning here is that LinkedIn will limit how many people a day you can invite into your network. So you do a search, you put the criteria in for these people that can't sleep at night, and you'd invite up to 20 of them a day into your network. Someone like yourself, Adam, who will be welcomed with open arms if you were to send an invite to a CEO or a founder or an investor. The response I get, I sometimes think that they've got a crucifix or garlic at the screen because I'm a recruiter. You'll probably get an 80% conversion rate for invites that you sent out, but you can't send more than 20 a day. LinkedIn won't allow that.
So you do have to accept the limitations of the environment at which you're going into, but you're still only going to attract the right kind of target if you've completed that step 2, which is figure out who I'm going for.
Absolutely. So step 2 is where you've done it before, but step 3 is the ideal client profile or avatar, whatever phrase you want to. It's absolutely key. There's over 1 billion users on LinkedIn now, I'm told, across the globe. And if you were to transfix that 1 billion people onto a calendar, all you need to worry about are the last hours of New Year's Eve. That's everything else throughout the year, forget about. It's all noise. You only want to focus on those individuals that appear on those last couple of hours. Unfortunately, it's how it was put to me, and it sort of rang true very, very, very quickly. Yeah, no, absolutely. So the fourth element, which is the content part, has changed since Q3 last year. I put content out every day, and overnight, traction that got went through the floor. So I was speaking to my peers, and we were all having a bit of a pity party about it. Oh, isn't it terrible? Exactly. What's going on? Well, no one likes us anymore. What do we? Apparently, that's a long story for another day. But apparently, LinkedIn had changed the algorithm.
Yeah, and it wasn't obvious to many of us at the beginning.
No, it wasn't. There's, whether or not they're focusing on paid advertising now, and I don't know. But the importance of content is still key to your brand, but the onus isn't as high as it was last summer. So I would be, if we were having this conversation in 2023, I'd be saying to you, Adam, you really need to be posting every day if you can. And I'm not including stuff that you share, that you curate from other people. This is stuff that's come from the desk of Adam Horner, your experiences, your views, your anecdotes. Let's get it out there. I would say now, the key thing is consistency and quality. They out-trump quantity completely. So if you can only post once a week, and that post should really be a story. And if you're a tech leader with 10 years experience, you will have dozens, maybe hundreds of stories, anecdotes that you might think are really boring and no one wants to hear about. But that isn't the case. People want to hear your stories. As long as the common thread is coming from a position of knowledge, and you want to convey that level of knowledge to those people reading your content, essentially. Okay, that's the crux of it. But LinkedIn is a social network, and they want people to communicate. They want people to have conversations, and they want people to know what makes you tick. So I would advise as well, whether you're only going to post once or twice a week, to do that consistently. 80% of it's got to be business related, but 20%, no more, can be personal stuff. Could be your hobbies. It could be, I don't know, a personal view that you've got something. Although there is a slight word of warning. Someone once said to me many moons ago when I first worked in sales was, Warren, never discuss religion or politics. And I'll add another one to that, or football with people if you don't know them. Okay, because you can easily upset people with your own personal point of view. And I would apply that to LinkedIn as well. There are some people that don't, but generally speaking, I wouldn't go down that avenue. That's the only real caveat I would say to the personal stuff. And obviously, keep it nice as well. The way that the algorithm worked on LinkedIn is as mysterious nearly as the algorithm that Google uses for the organic searches if you want to get yourself on page one of a search.
Yeah, and they've sort of deliberately kept it opaque from that perspective, haven't they?
Well, I'm sure that there's a big, some massive aircraft hangar somewhere with thousands of people in that are reading our content. And that's what I like to think anyway, and giving it a tickle or not. But there are things that LinkedIn do use to grade your content as to where it will appear on the news feed of your new network. But there's nothing that directly that you can do. It's all about activity. And if you've got time today, I can share where people can find that. It's a very simple page URL within LinkedIn, and it will show you how well that you're doing.
Yeah, that's one of those things we can put in the show notes. That'd be great. Yeah, because I think engagement is another one of those key things, isn't it? With LinkedIn, it's not just about posting, but it's also about interacting with your peers' content as well.
Absolutely. So you've stolen my fire for the fifth one. You've absolutely nailed it. The fifth one, and I would say to people, is that every day you have to have at least 10 interactions with your network. And it's the interactions you have through their content. So whether it's supporting your peers, okay, adding value to their content, or whether or not, because you're going to see your new network's content appear in your feed. Yeah. If you see a piece of content that comes into your feed that you either really, really agree with or really, really disagree with, as long as you can make a comment on that from a position of knowledge and leave it with a question as well, whatever it could be. Do you agree with me? Question mark. It can't just be great post, thumbs up. That isn't going to wash. Okay. It's got to be a couple of sentences because the algorithm likes that. But exactly. But this is where you decide who sees your knowledge. You decide who's going to. So, for example, there could be a particular company that you've admired for years. Got a great example. There was a Danish guy who I managed to get into Lego through the head of HR that I met on holiday in St. Lucia about 5 years ago. We can't use recruiters, Warren. I said, I've got a Danish guy. I said, he's an absolute expert in particular arena of e-commerce technology, and his dream is to work for Lego. We'll send him my details. So I got him to send the details over, and they basically offered him the job. I wasn't involved with it at all, but it was an introduction that I did. But
so you just never know where those connections are going to come from, do you?
Absolutely. But if you have a dream company that you really want to work for, you send an invite out to the CEO, and that CEO accepts your invite. The easiest thing to do is to go into that CEO's profile, and you can look at every piece of content that they've posted, and you can even a like or an applaud is an interaction, but the best interactions are comments that you can make. I call this approach, and this is I've made this up, so if you hear it anywhere else, they've copied it from me. There's no copyright. I call it ethical stalking.
Ethical stalking, right, okay.
Where you're putting your head above the parapet to them. You're not saying at any time, oh, by the way, I'm looking for a job. What you're saying is that I'm somebody who has knowledge in this industry sector. I'm somebody that has a solution to potential problems that you might have, but I'm going to show you what those solutions are before we've even had a discussion.
So I'm going to show you rather than tell you, effectively.
Absolutely. I'm going to demonstrate to you through the conversations, through the responses, through my content, through my engagement. I mean, other pieces of content is what we're doing here today. This is a wonderful vehicle to use as content. And I will definitely use this as a piece of content. So if there are tech leaders out there, they get invited as guests, use that as content. If you get recommendations from an old boss, use it as content. It's not just, writing things up on a daily basis. So yeah, that they are the 5 pillars that I suggest that people consider adopting. It's a slow burner. It isn't going to happen overnight, which is why it's great if you're not looking or you don't need to look for a job. You just want to consider your options. Start doing this within a month. What tends to happen is that, I won't say out of the blue, because you're still going to get the companies from abroad, wherever they may be, offering you their services for mobile development or whatever it might be. You're still going to get that. Okay, that is not going to stop. But what you'll get is you'll get somebody who you have no idea who they are, will ask you your opinion, or will ask you a question on something. It could be a post that you've written. And for me, in 2024, this is the new age of CV submission.
And this is the way you sort of create yourself. So it's not really about your job history and your working history. It's about, so let's see if we can test my memory now, go through those 5 steps. So the first one was to define what you're good at, what you deliver, and some sort of metric that underscores that, is to define the persona of the person within the company that you want to go and work at.
No. So number 2 is where you've done it.
Number 2 is where you've done it before. So that's your track record to show that you've actually done that before. Number 3 is then who it is that you'd like to go and work for.
Yeah, your ideal clients. Yeah.
So the persona and the person you'd like to go and work for. So number 4 then is to start posting regularly on LinkedIn, or consistently, even if it isn't frequently. And then the last one is to interact with your peers and with your target audience regularly, again, on LinkedIn, and create a conversation rather than just using the little like button.
Absolutely. And if everyone does that, I'll be out of a job.
So in some ways, do that because that's going to help you. But no, wait, don't do that because I need to start for the work.
I only want half of the CTO world to look at this, by the way. Okay. But no, that's in a nutshell. And you can tell I'm not a marketing guru. I'm a recruiter who has realized in the last 8 or 9 years that marketing is the key element of our job.
Yeah. And do you think that's any different, Warren, whether you're an experienced CTO already in a CTO role, or if you're somebody who's perhaps not yet a CTO, you're probably a little bit layer or 2 down in the stack, and you're aspiring to be that CTO? Is the advice exactly the same?
Absolutely. I mean, and I don't need to tell you this, Adam, but one organization's CTO is another organization's full stack web developer, is another organization's enterprise architect. So if someone's on a journey and they want to become what I would call a serious CTO, where strategic and leadership outcome is more important than coding outcome, I think at any level, you should start to take your career seriously by understanding the outcome of what it is that you do, recognizing if there's a gap in that outcome to what a typical or traditional CTO does successfully, and address that. Okay. But address it by asking for help with your peers. I'm sure you know that I've got a community off of LinkedIn that has tech leaders across the globe within it. And the busiest group within that community is the group where people ask for help.
Yeah. And this is, just to be clear, this is the tech think tank, isn't it, you have?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So, and how can people get onto that, the tech think tank group?
Oh, well, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. Thank you. I will say that within my LinkedIn profile, there should be a link, but I will double check that. But if anybody wants to DM me, I will send them an invite and they'd be more than welcome to join.
Excellent. Right. It all comes back to LinkedIn then. It'll come back to LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Keep it in one place if I can. Yeah.
Brilliant. Warren, let's have a look at sort of the market around there then. So we talked a lot about what candidates and aspiring CTOs and current CTOs can do for themselves. What do you think's happening or changing with the people who are looking for and recruiting CTOs right now? Because it seems to me that there has been a bit of a shift in terms of A, what is being looked for, and B, the quantity or number of people that are looking for CTOs right now.
There's an element of merging with some job roles that has happened within the hands-on tech world, and it's beginning to happen in the tech leadership as well. But I think the biggest impact in companies and how they go about looking for and searching for tech leaders and any roles is that there is this view, and it's becoming more popular, that it's easier to do it yourself. I call it DIY recruiting, where they will create a job role, or they could merge job roles together. So we could have the CTPO or whatever you want to describe them as now, but they will take ownership of using job adverts, but sadly not going to the depth that someone like me would do when they're looking. So what's happening, what I'm seeing a lot of now, are people recruiting really good people and then 6 months later realizing that they need great people.
So the vicious circle sort of thing.
It is. I never ever say to somebody, I told you so, because we're talking about people's lives here. But ultimately, there's always somebody out there who's going to be doing the role that you need better than anyone else. And the job of a great CEO is to know who those people are, or a great founder.
Famous network.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really great CEOs that I know, and part of their weekly routine, however many millions or billions their business is turning over, is to have a certain amount of coffees, probably virtual coffees now, with people that don't work for them, but who could work for them one day, work for the competition. And they will regularly have 1 or 2 coffees a week with these people. Not enough CEOs take talent seriously enough. And they will, I'm going to use a polite word now, delegate it to HR or talent acquisition to oversee what I think is the most important part of getting right to determine if your business is going to be successful, which is the talent piece.
And that's building that top team, right?
Building the team and building everyone around it. Okay. A CEO's job for me, and I'm a little bit biased, is to make sure they've got the best talent that they can have, not just accepting talent.
And so you talked about that's being delegated somewhat. Is that the change that we've seen recently, or are there other changes in the industry that's happened over and above that?
That's a really good point. Absolutely. That the internal recruitment function now, you're finding that people that have the knowledge within a business are being kept as far away from the process, the recruitment process, as possible until an interview is being scheduled. So the screening...
That seems counterintuitive to me.
It is, yeah. So the screening element, the CV reviews are all done, in my experience, by people who don't have enough knowledge to make those decisions. It's a bit harsh.
But it's the kind of people who haven't built up the instinct for exactly what it is they're looking for.
Absolutely, but it's not their fault because they've been told to do that by leadership. And it's a leadership, ultimately it's their problem, it's their responsibility, it's their baby, they've got to get it right. And the message to me, to CEOs, to founders, to investors is take ownership of it, make it personal, get to know who the key players are in your industry set. In fact, if you're going to have a HR or a talent acquisition team, instruct them who they should be approaching or the types of people they should be approaching, rather than relying on, as I've already mentioned, the good old job adverts. But Adam, we're going through very fluid times at the moment. This paradigm shift that I touched upon at the start of our chat is nowhere near settling down.
So it's still in flux and changing massively at the moment.
Absolutely. So
what are the changes you've seen so far? And I know there's no crystal ball, but if you have some sort of predictions on where you think it's going to go.
I think that the need for people to take ownership of their personal brand. And we've touched upon it quite a lot today. For me, it will be very much the missing link. If you're an individual who considers themselves as being somebody who's damn good at their job and wants to be noticed, doesn't want to have to rely on the hamster wheel of traditional recruitment, then they've got to create a brand for themselves. It doesn't mean if they create a brand for themselves that they're looking for a job. It means they're simply they're sharing with a community what it is that they do. And he gave, and I know it's not, if you're really busy as a tech leader and you're working 50, 60 hours a week, who wants to spend an hour a week, let alone an hour a day, going through LinkedIn and stuff? But it is important, I think, to focus some time on something like that.
Because the thing that's fascinating from my perspective, if I sort of take a zoom out and look at the large span of my career, I studied in investment banking, last century, right, 1999. And when I think about the advice that I was given back then, it was something along the lines of, figure out what everybody else is looking for. Get good at that because that's the current trend or topic or skills that people are looking for, and do that because that will get you a job. But what you're saying is exactly the other way around. It's figure out what your superpower is and make sure that is obvious on your profile, and then talk to lots of people so that they can appreciate that that's what you do. And through that, you'll attract the right kind of companies coming to you to say, I want you. Is that a fair summary, do you think?
That's wonderfully put in and summarised, Adam. And I would say that if you're on a journey and you recognise that there's a gap, okay, so whether it be, you mentioned going back to the turn of the millennium when you were trying to find those technologies out there that, were you hadn't seen much before, and you wanted to, I would use those processes that I've just described to you, but make sure that your ideal clients are organisations that can give you that knowledge, that work in that sector. But you offer that there's something that you can offer them. There's a trade-off that you can offer them that will make you appealing to them. And one of the things that will make you very appealing is that this client that you're approaching won't have to pay someone like me a recruitment fee.
Because they'll come to you, they'll have discovered you because of who you are. So it isn't really, so I had a question that I had ready for you, which is all about standing out in the crowd, but your whole advice is completely counter to that. It's not about standing out in the crowd. It's about standing apart from the crowd.
It's about being noticed by the right crowd. So somebody said to me, this guy was known as Google Dave for obvious reasons. He was a short, scouse guy with loads of personality, took recruitment training and marketing training back in 2013. And he said to all of us you can imagine what a rowdy bunch of recruiters can sometimes be like. And he said to you, right, guys, none of you are recruiters anymore. And he got our attention. He said, you're now all marketeers. And we all laughed at him. Yeah, okay, all right. Come on, let's go back to the pub. Let's meet in the office. But we sat and listened to him. And what he basically said was, and I'm again paraphrasing slightly, is that with regards to social media, you have to consider that if you want to convey your brand with regards to social media, think of it about going into a bar. And at the bar, standing at the bar, are all your ideal clients, are your avatars, whatever you want to call them. And they're all together at the bar having a drink. And you're coming in because you've got this message for them, okay? What you don't do at a bar is make your way to the front of the bar and say to everyone, hi, I'm Warren. Let me talk to you. You'd either get thrown out or the barman would ask you to politely leave or leave everyone alone. The way he said to do it is that you go on the periphery of the crowd and you start listening into the conversation that's happening. And then you start to, once you maybe catch someone's attention on the edge of the crowd, to sort of add a comment here and there and start to have a conversation, maybe buy that person a drink, and then just get yourself into the middle of the crowd so that by the end of the evening, everyone knows your first name, you shared phone numbers with everybody, and it's probably a bad example, a little bit dated now, but hopefully that gives you what he was trying to convey to us, and it certainly resonated with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the parallels between that and your LinkedIn technique are very close.
I think so. Although the bar, in my years now, being a teetotaler as I am, I can't use the bar analogy, but it always refers back to the bar. In fact, I still give people directions by pubs as well. So most of those pubs aren't there anymore. They're probably apartments or flats now, but exactly, or coffee houses or something. Yeah.
Cool. So Warren, then, if I was going to ask you probably the hardest question of all, if you were to summarize in a couple of sentences, what we as CTOs need to do to position ourselves in 2024. How do you summarize it just in a couple of sentences?
Know yourself, be very honest with yourself, quantify what you do. And if you like what you do, then broadcast that message to the right people.
Absolutely awesome.
Is that succinct enough?
I think it is. I think it's very good. I think it's the kind of thing that people can look at and grasp hold of and understand where they need to start. There's a whole lot of depth behind that, but I think it's a great summary.
I mean, I say all of that. Of course, if anybody wants to contact me for a chat, then they're also very welcome to do that. And as you said, there are other things in addition to what I've discussed today. But, you know, I get more of a kick from actually sharing this advice and listening to people and giving them direction than I do when I actually find homes for people.
I think when you're a master of your craft, that is one of the elements, isn't it? It's making sure that other people can benefit from it, isn't it?
100%. It may also be my age, and now that I'm a granddad, you do tend to see things slightly differently. Don't sound shocked.
Awesome. Warren, if people want to get hold of you, if they decide that they want you to help them on their path, how do they get hold of you? What's the best way to get hold of you? We talked about LinkedIn earlier on. Is that the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, it's probably. So it's linkedin.com, very imaginative tagline, which is simply the CTO Recruiter. Or they can go to my website, which is edisonhillsearch.com. I have the same tag on my X account also. I don't know whether this is the right place to share phone numbers, Adam, or email addresses, or you want to leave it in the...
I think you've got those. What we'll do is we'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile there, because I know you've got both of those on your LinkedIn profile section, haven't you?
That'd be the easiest thing to do. And obviously, you know, invite me into your network if I'm not already in your LinkedIn network as well. And I'd be delighted. I've got Calendly links all over my LinkedIn profile page, and please feel free to grab a time.
So book a meeting with you to sit down and have a chat for 15 minutes.
Absolutely. There's no charge.
Warren, thank you very much for your help today. It's been wonderful to learn about the ways in which we can all do better in terms of actually taking charge of our career as CTOs. And for those of you listening, look forward to hearing you and seeing you in the next episode. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for listening all the way through to the end. Just before you go, I'd like to ask you for one thing in return for putting together all these episodes of the CTO Playbook podcast for you. Please leave a review. Wherever you're listening, whether that is Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whichever platform you're on, leaving a quick review will help more CTOs find the podcast and enable me to create more great episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the CTO Playbook.